Hello, social media. It's good to see you all again, I know that you're out there. I have a great presentation for you today. That's something that's very heartfelt. It's that time of year. March Madness is here. And the question I have is, do you have the playoff mentality? The playoff mentality. And this ranges from preparing to go through your work as a athlete dealing with the playoffs right now, but even as a professional, and we'll get to that later. How do we define the playoffs? Playoffs are defined as postseason or finals of a sports league or a competition played after a regular season where the top competitors determine the league champion or similar accolades. But the league's best teams may not always play each other during the regular season. So sometimes we lose sight of how big the competition is until the playoffs come. And unfortunately, when the playoffs come, it might be too late because you didn't have the playoff mentality when you needed it. What is that playoff mentality? We hear professional athletes in the NFL, the NBA, even Major League Baseball say it all the time. You got to turn it up a notch. You have to win or go home. You win or you're done. So let's take the tournaments that are going to start really soon, not just with the NCAA, but also with the AAU circuit, which is very important for a lot of people. You go from having something like a 12-week season, January to March, to a 12-hour season. Let's talk about all these weekend tournaments that take place where you can go and play games, 3 games on Saturday, 3 games on Sunday, 2 hours apiece. So you go from a 12-week process, getting that down to 12 hours. And the first few games may be really easy and kind of give you a inappropriate impression of where you really are because you may just be blowing teams out or not have that struggle. But then you get to that championship round, that final championship game, and if you don't have the playoff mentality, it can be really tough. Then you want to remember these 2 things. It's not just another game. The implications are high. Like we said, it's win or go home. But the other thing you have to remember, and this is an old school statement, all is fair in love and war. And when we're talking about playoffs, this ain't love, so it's definitely war. So now I want to introduce a concept many of you familiar with, the Goon Squad. That's right. In come the enforcers. Who are the enforcers? Enforcers are really people that may have a lack of playing ability, but is compensated by his or her ability to be all in if it's physically challenging the opponents or verbally challenging the opponents. Goons or enforcers, that's a negative reference when we say goons, but it's very obvious. And I think in hockey is the most overt place where you see an enforcer, somebody who's put on the team in most cases just to fight. But in sports, and this may be a little controversial, I'll say this in advance, having an enforcer may play a different kind of role. There were several University of Chicago studies, and it was a study on group evolution. And what they came up with is that they found in any group, whatever it may be, there are 4 distinct roles. There's a leader, there's a lieutenant who acts as an enforcer, there's the joker, the funny guy or girl, then there's a nerd. Now, what was interesting about these studies through the University of Chicago is that they found these same elements in juvenile gangs, in the actual mafia, and even in legitimate businesses. So the same elements were there, even in the juvenile gangs, the mafia, and even in legitimate corporate businesses. So what they did with this study, they got a group of alphas, not my fraternity, but alpha males all together, and they realized that even when you get leaders together, they will still take on those same roles, and the same things were apparent. You had a leader, you had a lieutenant, you had a joker and a nerd, all amongst leaders. So as controversial as this may sound, you have to understand that when we start talking about an enforcer or someone who can respond to the intimidation of another team, that is a tribal element. That goes back to just who we are as humans, that there's always going to have to be someone, whether they want to or not, who's going to have to step up. So my question to my athletes and my question to my coaches and my parents is, what is your role going forward? Who are you on that team? And let me be clear, I am not advocating any type of violence in sport. I'm not advocating you going and punching somebody in the face. I'm not advocating you going and, doing something to hurt someone. However, in this playoff mentality, the stakes are much higher. So you have to ask yourself, what is your role? And if there's not a role there as an enforcer, who can be that? Now, get this. Are you there to win? Are you there to enforce? Okay. What does enforcement involve? And like I said, if it involves fighting, you're not going to last because you're going to get put out. okay? And you can't be the leader and be the enforcer too. You can't be the best player on the team and be the enforcer too, because if you get put out of the game for whatever reason and the other person gets put out and all they're there to do is to cause havoc, that's not parity, okay? So if it's time to take a stand on your team, who's going to be the one to step up? Who's going to be the one to stop that other player from being totally aggressive with your star player or your teammates? Who's going to step up? And my question is, what sacrifice are you willing to make for the overall goal of winning the game? Now, I don't want to lose you guys on this. When it comes to an enforcer, there's someone who's going to put up with the verbal abuse or the name calling. There's someone who's going to be able to put up and deal with and respond to all the physicality that may come. And it's not to say that coaches actually send student athletes out to be this enforcer. It's not to say that the coaches send people out to just go after people. But as I said earlier from the University of Chicago studies, this is a human element. This is tribal. Sometimes when that game gets going, it gets to be so passionate that a normally calm, collective coach, or even a parent for that matter, may say, kill him, do whatever you got to do. But the question is, what role are you willing to play? Now, the other part of it is, if you're on the opposite end of that enforcer, if you're on the opposite end of that person who's trying to intimidate, what are you willing to sacrifice for the sake of the team? You have to put your ego in check, because if I know in my mind as a coach or as a sports psychologist to say, you know what, that person, if you really challenge them, they're going to lose themselves, and you may have an opportunity to win the game because they're going to take themselves out. Are you willing as a star player to be able to take attacks on your masculinity or femininity? Are you willing to be able to take people saying things to you that are normally out of order that they would not say at any other time, because this is a playoff opportunity and they want to do whatever they can to get you riled up? Again, you have to remind yourself, what is the overall goal? Is it to win the game? And if it's to win the game, you have to be prepared for the distractions that are going to come. Now, the very important thing you have to focus on is being present. When we're in the playoff mentality, a win or go home, you can't really worry about what the next outcome is going to be. All you can focus about is what's going on in this game right now, okay? And how do you avoid getting those distractions? How do you avoid getting past that and looking to other things? You need to meditate. Prior to the game, you need to have a process where you can think about and visualize what you want to do. If you look behind me, one of the things we talk about is that mental rehearsal, okay? That imagery, you need to be able to visualize it because you know it's going to come. And this goes for coaches, players, and teams. Now, in many cases, you may have a very close-knit team where the parents are all involved and things like that. And if you have that, everybody needs to take an attitude that we're not going to let the passion and emotion of this game push us beyond. We're going to continue to support our players, because what happens in many cases, when a player sees a coach or a parent get a little unhinged, that player loses confidence in their ability to stay calm too. So it's really important that as a coach or even as a parent, even though we're not playing, your athletes are looking at you and they're responding to you, your body language and what you do. So you have to kind of keep things in order too. That's why we have to come back to two principles we talk about on a regular basis. That's self-evaluation and self-regulation. You need to self-evaluate. You need to really ask yourself in the quiet moments, you know, what are the things that would really challenge me and make me kind of lose my stuff if someone challenged me with that? And once you realize what those things are, like I can't have somebody talking to me a certain way, I can't really take a strong foul, well, then you need to self-regulate. You need to step back and say to yourself, okay, if these things happen, what's my process and what I'm going to do? Like I said, it can be someone yelling. It can be the hard fouls. So that self-regulation talks about you taking a step back, taking a deep breath, and being able to relax. It may even require you stepping out of the game for a moment to gather yourself. You have to have this plan in order, because once we get to the playoff time, every moment counts, and you can't just go in expecting that it's just another game. You have to prepare for all these things that happen. They talk about great coaches and why they're so successful because they prepare for any and everything that can happen. What are you going to do if someone does something out of order and disrespectful and the official misses it? Or even if they see it, it's just so bad. Are you going to lose yourself right there and have that fight and go beyond? Or are you going to really try to work to see what you can do next? What if the circumstance don't provide for that? What if you don't have that opportunity to move out and do something different? What if you really don't have that choice? What if all you have is an opportunity right now is just to say, you know what can I do and what do I have to do? And you have to be able to make the right kind of decision. So with that, as we prepare to wrap up, I just want you guys to really ask yourself, do you have a playoff mentality? Are you thinking about the playoffs being not just another game and doing what you need to do to go forward? And if you're not willing to sacrifice parts of your ego, if you're not really to do different things, Because it's no good that the best player on the team gets kicked off the team because they end up getting in a fight. It's no good that the best player on the team can't really perform because they don't have an enforcer on their team that can stop someone from being so physical and doing all these things. Now, I'm not here trying to promote any kind of controversy. I'm saying you want to stay within the lines of being sportsmanlike. But however, this is the playoffs, baby. It's a lot on the line. So between now and the end of March, whether it's the NCAA, it's high school basketball, whether it's tournament time with your AAU teams, you really need to have the playoff mentality. And one way I want to be able to help you guys with that is through this summer, through the SBS Edge Summer 18 Mental Toughness and Social Media Etiquette training that we're going to be doing. We're going to be going throughout the state of Michigan, starting on June 30th, day after my birthday in Detroit, at the Horatio Williams Foundation. On July 14th, we'll be in East Lansing at the East Lansing Public Library. July 27th, we're going to go way up north to Lake Superior State. We're going to be partnering with Grindhouse. We'll be in the UP. August 4th, we'll be at Mott Community College, and we're wrapping up the final dates August, probably mid-August in Grand Rapids, and kind of finally wind up in Bronco Country and Kalamazoo at the end of August, and those dates are still coming together. So as I say to you, do you have the playoff mentality? And the last transition I'll make, if you are in the corporate world, it's the same thing. How are you handling these deadlines? Are you preparing for any and everything that can happen? Because it's not just a game. It's the biggest game, and you don't want to lose that opportunity to do the best you can. So once again, here at Sports Psychology Solutions, I thank everyone for tuning in, for saying hello, but you got to have the playoff mentality. You got to keep pushing. Thank you very much, and I'll see you guys next time.